Thank you so much for joining us. It's very, very important that you are here because the topic we are discussing right now is the key. So, as you know, it is our discussion focuses on IRCC's update request and procedural fairness letters. I'm absolutely excited to introduce the three panelists with us. We have with us, I'll start with ladies first, Elizabeth Long. Elizabeth is a certified specialist in immigration law and a senior partner at Long Mangalji LLP. She has an extensive experience on complex immigration matters. Elizabeth is someone who is actually in the right middle of the entire shift we are seeing with IRCC because as a senior immigration lawyer, she works very closely with founder when these update requests and procedural fairness letters are coming in. And that's what makes her perspective really important today because she's not just looking at these letters from outside, she's actually helping break down, explain these letters to her clients, and understand what officer is really asking for. And then trying to help the clients understand how detailed, how structured, how evidence backed response to these letters should be. So she sees kind of both sides, what IRCC is questioning and how founders are responding. And that makes her insights really important for us today. Elizabeth, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today, taking time out on this very important topic. Next on the panel joining us is Spencer Green. Spencer is also an immigration expert and an immigration lawyer at Green and Spiegel LLP, one of Canada's leading immigration law firms, and has been advising founders and entrepreneurs on complex immigration pathways. His work really sits at the interaction of legal strategy and real world application of these challenges. He spends a lot of time, and I've been talking to him in last couple of months, in helping clients in interpreting what's being asked, not just at the face value, but what actually IRCC is reviewing in these application. So what you will hear from Spencer today is also it's a lot around the patterns he's seeing, what kind of updates are coming. Again, he will be generic here. He cannot discuss specific cases about his clients, but that's what he's going to be focusing on. What is he has a lot of insight upon what is coming repeatedly from IRCC and where the applicants are getting stuck and how responses can be framed more effectively. On that note, Spencer, thank you so much for taking out and joining us. I know it's not an easy topic which we are discussing today, but this is very important for everyone to know what's happening here. Team, I would request you to keep looking at the admission. There are more people coming in, but make sure all the order AIs are being removed here. Third panelist, last but not the least, is Dave Mitra. He's a lawyer as well with extensive experience in working with founders and startup teams, which are specifically navigating IRCC processes and procedural fairness letters. I think so. Dave and his other lawyer friends have focused quite significantly in some time on the responses to procedural fairness letter. He brings a very hands-on perspective when it comes to working with founders through these processes. He has been actively involved in helping clients respond to IRCC queries and navigate this increasing level of scrutiny we are seeing. What is particularly I think so valuable with Dave's perspective is ability to connect the legal side with the operational realities of various founders which are going through and where two sometimes don't align, like what you have been doing, what the expectations were, and actually how to bring evidence to prove what you're doing. So he will be able to speak from the perspective of the business as well as the legal side and what IRCC expects versus what founders are actually presenting with. On that note, Dave, thank you so much for taking time and joining. Everybody who's on the call, some of you who don't know me, I'm Upasna Sharma. I'm managing director for Startup Visa with TIE Toronto, which was a designated incubator under the Startup Visa program before the program was closed on December 17th or put on hold. And I'm also the managing director for Startup Visa program with Tangentia Ventures. On that note, without further ado, let's start because I know you're all keen on knowing what's happening, where we are. We can go full screen sign right now, if possible. So I'll start with Liz with you, and Dave and Spencer, please chime in when you're ready. Over the past year, you all have seen a noticeable increase in IRCC update request and procedural fairness letter. What has changed the most? Liz, let me start with you.
Right. So, in 2025, there was basically a blanket silence almost on most applications. We saw from the stats, very, very few applications being touched. Starting this year, though, we have now seen movement on quite a lot of files. Certain files, especially that were almost there. The officer had asked for additional documents that had been submitted, and especially those that are on the priority list. So those from the venture capital groups, the angel investor groups, and the incubators that have received investments. Those are on the top priority list that had already been sort of halfway through. Now we are seeing movement. Now, a lot of times, the officers who are looking at these applications may have changed. And we are seeing procedural fairness letters that are asking additional questions that weren't asked by the original um, officer. And I think the IRCC these days, they are probing a lot further than they may have years before. Prior to the changes in 2024, they're probing a lot more as to what has been done in the business. That's what I'm seeing. What about you guys?
Yeah, happy to chime in here. So I am seeing a very similar pattern. I would say, similarly to Liz, the last year or so really was a lot of silence. And starting in 2026, at around the time that we saw the pause, I've started to see some more movement on files, similarly to Liz, mostly with priority processing files. And I think generally, I think you'll sort of see this as a theme throughout all of our answers to these questions. We've seen IRCC become a lot more uh, tight with the way that they scrutinize these types of files. Even the questions specifically, they are changing from what has been done to really specific pointed questions about different aspects of the business that they want to see progress. And I think that this is IRCC's message to say, you know, a reminder that this is an active investment and that the expectation of applicants is to provide active and ongoing management of the business. And, I would say that in our office, we are seeing more movement in 2026, but more pointed, specific questions about different aspects of how the business has moved forward since the application was submitted.
Yeah. No, makes sense. Dave, anything you would like to add here?
Yeah, we just like add a quick note. And I've been asked this exact question like a bunch of times by founders, and this is the answer I would give them, like from an officer's point of view. Like if I'm wearing an officer's hat,
Yeah.
I would look at a founder in a way that I would not give a special treatment. It would just be like uh, if the founder would have to run the business in a country, how would that person run the business ordinarily?
Yeah.
Like what steps that person would take. And you would take the exact steps in the Canadian geo as well. So there's nothing different. So as long as you've followed a certain methodology, you follow.
I think so. We are having network issue with Dave. Can you hear him? Okay. By the time Dave comes back, Dave, check your network and see. I actually have a follow-up question. I think so. What both Spencer and Liz you said is really, really useful, and we are seeing that. But my question is, do you think there is a kind of shift that they are now evaluating businesses more on actual execution rather than what the future potential is? Spencer, you want to go with it first?
I would say definitely. I think, I don't know about you, Liz, but I've seen point blank officers ask, "What have you done? What are your marketing efforts? Show us screenshots of your product development that's been done to date. Show us proof that you filed taxes. Show us proof that you own the IP." So I do think that the questions have definitely shifted to more of a what have you done as opposed to what will you do. I still think both are important, but given the fact that processing times have increased, I think that's led to officers having to look back and say, over the last however many years, have you sat and done nothing, or have you been, saying what you said you were going to do in your original business plan?
Yeah.
Yes, and
Liz?
yeah, I agree. I mean, the policy, the law is still to see whether or not it will be like the person will do in the future. However, what you have been doing with this business is very good evidence as to what you will be doing. And so I think it could be argued in many situations where if founders were able to work on the business for several years and nothing has been done, that it could be inferred that in the future, especially if the business plan had said in year one, this will happen in year two, year three, it was not followed. So if it was not followed exactly, there should be some sort of explanation as to why it is that this business plan wasn't able to be carried out. And certainly there are different kinds of reasons. For example, someone may not have been able to get a work permit as soon as they thought that they were able to. However, even if you weren't able to get a work permit, you may still have been able to do other kinds of work, and the business may have progressed. So every situation has its own sort of explanation, and it's not necessarily that if you haven't carried out according to the original business plan that your application will fail. However, you must give reasonable answers as to why it is that your business plan was not carried out. And I would say that the reason that, well, I didn't get my PR yet, that's why the application has not been carried out, that's not necessarily going to be counted as a reasonable, accepted reason as to why you did not carry out and establish this business to as much as you possibly could,
Sure.
in given your circumstances.
Yeah, I totally agree with Liz. I think that's a great point. And I think, if you turn to the law where, you have to prove to IRCC that you are not entering into what they call an artificial transaction. And what they define that as is that you have entered into a an agreement with the designated organization solely for immigration purposes and not for the purposes of starting your business. And from a reasonable perspective, if you haven't done anything in the last year, 2 years, or 3 years, then it's likely very reasonable for an officer to take a look at that and say, hey, like you said you were going to do all of these things. And just like Liz was pointing to, and you don't have any reason as to why you said X, but you're doing Y, or you said X and you're doing nothing. And, that in the past has been upheld as a very valid reason for refusal. So I think that even if your intention is to start everything when you get PR, I think that it puts you in a position of risk, given that we now know that officers are looking back and trying to understand what you are doing, and that is the expectation.
So what I'm listening from both of you is thinking that you're gonna run your business when you get PR is a sure shot ground. It's not gonna be taken well and it's not gonna work. There is an expectation that you're actually doing what you had told them to do. If you have a reasonable thing to say, I couldn't follow what I told you, I'm pivoting it, that could be fair, but you need to actually run the operations of the company. So we are moving from potential to actually what is being done. Dave, I want to bring you in on this on a different angle because
Sure.
now from a generic question, I want to move into the specificity of what's happening. What we have been hearing and we have seen from the founders who got the letter of support from us, that areas like intellectual property and ownership are being looked at more closely at a high level. Why do you think that matters, and what is being happening at the intellectual property levels? And before Dave answers this question, I want to actually put a caveat here or a disclaimer. We are not telling here what you need to do right now. Your founders, you know how to run the company. We are just explaining the trend that we are seeing. Please don't take any advice from here as a legal advice or lawyers telling you how to respond to the IRCC's PFLs or how to run your business. You're all founders, you have your business plan. That will tell you how to run your business. We are just sharing our experiences and learning to guide you. Dave, do you want me to repeat the question?
No, I think that's a good question, and I would like to answer it through like an example.
Yeah.
And this is what we experienced in one of the PFLs, and this is what really took us by surprise. Um, so basically, now if the IP really kicks in from a copyright standpoint,
Yeah.
if the officer is trying to snoop around and look at the website, and then the registered copyright on the website belongs to a third party,
Yeah.
then it's obviously questionable.
Mhm.
Also, I think if the officer is goes it digs in further and is trying to if it's a web portal, if they're trying to evaluate the web portal using demo credentials that have been provided in the reports.
Mhm.
Uh, and if it's an if it's a mobile, if it's an application, they're trying to download a software development kit, and at that, even in the software development kit files, you have you have traces of a third party, then that also becomes questionable. So that's when they go deep into IP, asking that who's really built this, because if your IP documents and the assignment agreements say that it's the chief technology officer of a certain company that's built this uh, you know build this product or this application, then why is a third party's name in there? So that becomes questionable, and then you get into the whole justification phase. So this is something that founders also have to be mindful of. I understand that CTOs sometimes are not hands-on; they need support. But I think you don't know who's looking at the file,
Yeah.
right? So we have to ensure that we sanitize these things as well, because there's a pure intent at the companies and the founders end to build the product, but we also have to be mindful of what we are presenting.
Got it. No, that's a very important point, and I can tell you that something we want. I would add on to it is, what is the status of your trademark application or your copyright application is usually an information which is in the public domain. So if you haven't done it, it's a good idea to check it. When we're actually running your business in day-to-day life, you might not be looking at these aspects. They go in the background. But since now we know that IRCC is more specifically looking at your IP, so if you don't have an IP strategy, look into it now. Okay, because they want to make sure there is innovation. If you had an IP strategy and you said to the government that you're going to do take some steps, make sure what is the status of those steps. If you file for your IP and there are some, I would say, things against it, or there is objections, talk to your lawyers, IP lawyers, how to address those objections. So at least when IRCC comes asking, you're aware of what it was at that time. When you have 7 days, you might not be able to do it, so better to, if you don't have an IP strategy, work on it and start working on it now. It's never too late in a business to protect your IP. And if you had it, please make sure where the status is. On that note, Dave, thank you so much for explaining in so much in detail. Liz, I'm going to bring you and Spencer on another aspect here, which we are seeing a lot of it. Income tax returns, what is happening there? So, tax filings, financial reporting, how are you seeing trend on them? Are more and more letters asking for this, and how does this play out? Whoever wants to start first, Spencer and Liz.
Sure. I mean, with regard to tax documents, those were basically pretty basic documents to kind of show that your company is actually running in Canada.
Mhm.
That being said, just a filing of a tax document, of a tax return is not necessarily enough, or it's not necessarily going to support your application unless there is actual activity on it. If your whole tax document filing is zero,
Yeah.
what does that show? It shows that you hired an accountant to file the tax return, but it doesn't show that your company has been running anything, right? Even if your tax documents showed a minus, I would like that even more than a zero, because at least it shows that you have business activities on it. You know, your company is spending money trying to build your business, right?
Yeah.
Certainly revenues are excellent. And what we have been seeing, it's all common sense, or how the officers view things as common sense. Like as Dev was, explaining about the IP. Oh, sorry, now I'm hearing a little bit of echo. Okay. As Dev was explaining about the IP, if you're if you really cared about your business in Canada, wouldn't you be concerned that nobody else is representing your business except yourself? So you care about the copyright, right? Wouldn't you care about the technology is not stolen by anyone else, right? The trademark, the patents, okay? If that is so, what the officer is saying is, if you have filed these applications, right? Shouldn't you care about it? If you don't care about it and it's just left on the wayside, well, then why don't you care about it? Is it that this business is not something that you care about? Okay. So all of these kind of things, think about it from the point of view, like Dev was saying, is if you're running your business. If you're not running your business, that's an issue, right? So that's where I come from. What do you think, Spencer?
I will
I
actually
agree.
add a question here for Spencer before he adds in. And Spencer, sorry, I'm
Yeah.
taking your thought process up.
No
So
worries.
Spencer, as Dave said, if you're actually running your business, and Liz, you put this, so I want to ask you, Spencer, and if you have to add on this previous question, please do. But how do you think IRCC is right now distinguishing between a genuine business effort and something which seems to be immigration driven? So if you can start
I
with
think,
this and add the other points.
yeah, I think it all kind of wraps together, to be honest, because like Dev and Liz were saying, like they want to see genuine business efforts. They want to see that you're actually running your business and that you're doing the normal things that anybody who's trying to start a company in Canada would be doing. Would a normal founder be trying to like work with suppliers if that's applicable, to try to, get their brand out there, try to acquire customers, try to build their product, try to hire if that's something that is reasonable for the company at that time. And it's so important to document these things because you could build the next Google, but if you have no proof, then why would an officer believe you just if you're telling them, right? So, we always tell our clients, make sure you're taking screenshots of meeting with your team. Make sure you're taking screenshots of your social media posts. Make sure you're showing very clearly screenshots of how your product is being built. You know, Proof that you're hiring, proof that you're paying people, proof that you've entered into contracts with suppliers or third parties that are helping you move your business forward, proof of invoices to customers, just the normal, like Liz said, common sense things that anybody evaluating a business would want to see. So tying it back to the tax documents, like any reasonable person doing business in Canada should be filing their taxes. And even if it's negative, I agree with Liz. That's okay. If you're spending money, like not every startup is going to make money right away. Like that's okay. But at the end of the day, you need to be the ones to provide evidence that you are providing active and ongoing management of the business. So that's my sort of take on
Yeah.
that.
And I
Very well
agree
said.
with you, Spencer. The evidence is so important. Try to use emails as much as possible. When you have a business meeting, summarize it. As we had discussed today, this is what we are going to be doing. da 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 da, right? I know it's a lot of parts of the world. WhatsApp is, I don't really love WhatsApp. WhatsApp, you know, these short messages, it's very hard to discern like what exactly is going on. If you have them, you know, it's better than nothing. But emails are really great in showing exactly, you know, what you've discussed, summarizing them when you're, you know, dealing with vendors and partners and clients, etc. Keep all of those emails as part of your evidence.
No, great. Dave, would you like to add on to this?
Yeah, I think for something for the founders to take away is and this is again you know, the perspective that I have. Like if an officer is looking at, if he's pulled up the file, the only real evidence at that point, something that's more tangible, is your digital footprint. So, and they'll pull up the website for sure. Like if I was an officer, I would pull up the website right away. The one thing that I do not want to see on the website is like if I click on a link and then the link directs me to a 404 error page.
Yeah.
So, which means that, like, you know, something's off, like something's inactive. Like, you know, I would not give it a second thought. So if it's an active business, just like make sure that there are no 404 errors. So it's also important to just keep auditing what's out there,
Yeah.
because it might be a bad day, but like we don't want the officer to, you know, be looking at the website on a bad day.
Yeah, no, that's very valid. I think so. If you guys are making a sheet today of things to do and not to do just for guidance, please make sure as a team we don't go on our website all the time to see it's working. When I'm running my business, I don't check my website, but make it a habit. Because the difference between running a business in the real world versus for startup visa is one only. Things which you do in a mundane steps in a daily business life, you usually don't document it. Nobody does that in the world. But here, since you're answerable to someone how you're running your business, the mundane steps, the normal steps which you won't write or take a screenshot or put in an email, you'll have to go one extra step only to document it, because tomorrow when someone is going to ask you how did you build your Google, you need to show how. By just having revenue in the account might not be enough, because in the end you're running this business also for the purpose under the startup visa program. So that brings an added layer of scrutiny for you as to what you're doing. So in a normal course of business, things you would not have documented. You had a call with your co-founders. You might not have taken a screenshot of that. You had a call with your co-founders. You might not have done meeting notes of that. But thanks to AI, you have a lot of tools like AI meeting notes and all. Just make a habit of whatever mundane things that you're doing, document it, timeline it, so when an IRCC officer comes and asking what you have done, you can showcase your efforts which you might not have documented in a normal course. Am I right, Dave, Elizabeth, and
No,
Spencer on this?
Yeah, and I would to
absolutely.
Dev's point about the website, we are seeing a lot of inquiries from officers about websites. And I understand for many of you, you may not be at the stage where you are now marketing your product. You may be still building your product, right? However, I think and a lot of times, because the officers see what's public facing, and it may be to some of your situations, it may be good to sort of develop your marketing strategy plan with regard to your social media, your websites is sort of in parallel with your product, right? So, for example, let's say you're almost at the beta stage or whatever with your product. You might make some sort of social media announcement on that. You know, you might have, so it's almost like you're sort of engaging the public with your marketing and your product in parallel, so that it makes sense if someone is going to search your product, go onto your website, they see, okay, well, maybe the product is not completely up yet, but it does seem like they're actively engaging the public with this.
Perfect. No, that's really helpful. Now, I'm going to put three of you at a spot, and you might not be able to answer this question, but we do get asked. Maybe there is no pattern here. Like, do you think, and you guys, even if it's possible to figure out, there are some most common red flag or events that you think these PFLs are triggered, or it's a general process when they're going through the file, they're looking at it and they ask more information. Do you have any insight on this, Liz? Something you can share, Dave, and Spencer, if you can share on this as well.
I think in essence, a lot of it is what we've been talking about. The officers, they now, I think more than before, are doing their own independent research online. And a lot of times, when they do their independent research, they're looking at things like websites, social media, IP, anything that's publicly available to them. And then they're sitting down and writing their questions about what the situation is.
Mhm.
Even more than before. So it's very important that you keep all the evidence of what you have been doing internally, but also making sure that what is in the public view as well, when they're doing their independent research, is also very consistent with what you've been doing internally. It's just, to me, it's easier when you don't have to justify to the officer as to why it is that your public presence is not consistent with what you have been doing internally as well.
Sure. Dave, do you want to add something here?
Yeah, I think I would agree with what Liz just mentioned, and I think and what I've also heard, like in the last couple of months, is there's a strong focus on the LinkedIn activities of the team and the team members,
Mm-hmm.
because it's pretty big in Canada, and especially in this geo. And then there's a strong focus on founder activities on LinkedIn,
Okay.
like what's being posted, and
Yeah.
if an event is being attended, is the event relevant to the product that is being pitched?
Switched.
So stuff like that. So like again, like just going back to the application and what's like, and also an application sitting with an officer. I think at this stage with the current landscape, we should work like assuming the worst and just look at everything from pin to elephant, just everything. Um, because this is like you mentioned before, like this is a special situation. This is not like a regular person running a business.
This.
You're also being looked at.
What you're
There
running
are
and how you're running. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, Liz, you've made a very good point regarding social media, and Dave, you brought in website, and now you also said something about LinkedIn because it's very important in the North American geography. Spencer, if I can bring you here, what are you seeing more detail or technical question from officers compared to before? Like, are there more detailed and there are more technical questions? And what does that tell us about the applications being reviewed today?
Yeah, like I mean, I think in terms of like, specific the more specified questions that we've all been talking about, I'm seeing the same things. Social media, website, product development is a big one that I see.
Product development. Okay.
Asking for like, I think Dev mentioned like, you give them a demo and they can go in and check it out or screenshots. Um, Another thing that we see is they really want to poke into um, proof that you're able to do the job. In our files, this is always something that we submit right at the front, showing that you have the education, showing that you have the industry experience or management experience or founder experience or whatever that may be. So I think, that's also something that we've been seeing a little bit more of, asking for prototypes, asking, all this kind of stuff. And I think at the end of the day, it's really about thinking about what you can control as an applicant, trying to take the founder hat off and now the immigration applicant hat. and understanding that everything you do is going to be scrutinized by somebody who's going to make a decision as to whether or not to approve your file. And
Yeah.
so the way I always like to describe that to clients is like there's always going to be things you can control and there's always going to be things that you can't control. And the people that do the best are the people that take the things that are within their control and try to do them really, really well. So all these things that we're mentioning, posting online, documenting evidence, all of that stuff is all within an applicant's control. And you want to think about, at some point, there's going to be some person taking a look at everything you've submitted. And you want to put yourself in a position that when that officer takes a look and they say, you know what, there is nothing here that I can base a refusal off of.
Got it. I think so. You hit the nail on the head. Spencer here saying is every founder, there are some things which are in your control and you can control. But just keep in mind that everything that you're doing will be scrutinized. It can be, it may not be, but there is a possibility that it will be scrutinized. So please make a list of things that you can actually, that you're doing, you can control, and what your public image of your company is, because that is the first thing that would be scrutinized, and then you will have to answer on that. That's very important. You are running a business under scrutiny here. It's not just for the purposes of running the business or getting the clients and growing the company. That is always important. That's always the key of running any business. But here, there's an added level of scrutiny, and please make sure everything that you do, you document. See what you can do better, what you're doing in the daily business from the documentation perspective. And Liz, I'm going to pull you in here on something. We as you said before, you've seen that they're asking for websites. Dave said they're looking for LinkedIn. Spencer just mentioned that he has seen questions specifically on product development. He has seen the screenshots and demos being asked. Are there any specific themes or patterns you're seeing repeatedly across different applications right now?
Yeah, definitely. I think, this whole thing about looking at what you have done, and I think this whole mindset that founders should take is this. Don't think about what you cannot do. Think about what you can do. And if it is that your original business plan depended on all of you getting PR in 1 to 2 years, and that's not possible anymore, and you can't, maybe some of you weren't able to get your work permits to come to Canada, then revise your business plan and think about what is possible based on the current situation, right? And go through it together and look at what can be done. If you need to pivot, but record what it is that you need to pivot. As Spencer said, the officers right now are looking at, and they question, does this person have the skills to do the job? And sometimes it's, on the work permit applications, I've had really, really weird conclusions from people who have obviously have the experience. But, even if someone doesn't necessarily have all of the experience in the world to market or to, do something specifically, maybe they're just graduated. But if they actually have been building the website, they have been doing all of these things, that's excellent evidence that that person has the ability to do it because they've already been doing it. So the moral of the story is do it. If you are able to do something, instead of saying that I can do it, actually do it, then that is proof that you can do it.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point. Spencer, would you like to add something, or Dave, you would like to add something here?
I agree. I think,
No,
it's
a
really
valid point.
just about trying to do any of the actions that any normal founder who's trying to build a business in this country would do and
Yeah.
documenting it all so we can try to get a positive decision.
Yeah. And I have seen one thing. What happens is when sometimes the founders are so engrossed in product development or in marketing, the other thing starts falling apart, like the website stops working, another thing. So we always tell during an incubation program to the founders, that's very important, is that your platform, your website, everything are living organisms. Okay. As they grow, they're going to break down. So when you are making budgets for the launch of the company, for the growth of the company, it's very important to have significant budget for the maintenance of the product, what you've developed so far. Is it working? Because definitely you're going to develop further and pivot as you get the feedback from the customers. But what you have built so far, is it surviving? It is working fine. A constant check on that and a budget to maintain that is a very, very key factor, and you should take that into consideration. So please make sure when you know what you can do is continue to build on what you're building, but also maintaining what you have built and documenting every step of it. So I'm going to change the gears here and move it a bit. I want to get into a big theme of evidence versus narrative. Because when we ask the founders how you've been running business as an incubator, sometimes as a part of the homework that we are giving them, or as an investor, sometimes we get this narrative which is lacking evidence. So that is the point which I want to pick. Dave, I'm going to start with you. I know what we are from the designated entity perspective, what we are looking at. But in your experience, from the IRCCs assessing whether business is active, what do they actually look like in practice? What does it actually look like in practice?
Um, so my perspective on this would be that sometimes, a technology is complicated. The code base is complicated, and sometimes even the business model itself is fairly complex. Um, it could be a SaaS platform, it could be a fintech platform. But what we don't know is, like, is the officer qualified enough to understand what we are presenting? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So from a standpoint, and this is I suggest this to most of the founders that I work with, that you need to break it down to the basic rudimentary, like absolutely elementary. Just break it down as if a 5-year old would understand. So have the entire report indexed, and make sure that like an end user is able to navigate through the report and is able to go to the section that they think is relevant for their review,
Yeah.
and have the simplest of the languages, use flowcharts, graphs, or even embed a video for that matter for them to see it.
See.
um, because you don't know who's looking at it. Maybe the person is not as qualified as the founder, and maybe that person has not had the level of technical education or business education. So you don't know. So we always need to present it. We should rather present it in a way that we would do it to to a grandmother or to a 5-year-old.
Yeah. No, that's a very valid point. Make it simple. People can understand. If a visa officer is looking at multiple applications and it's difficult for them to understand what you're writing or what you're providing as an evidence, you're not helping. You're actually causing more problem. As a lawyers,
Yeah.
we were always told to have our submissions properly indexed so the judge can actually figure out what you're saying and which is the document supporting to what you're saying. So make sure your responses to PFLs are also organized. Liz, I want to bring it back you here because when we are organizing these documents, we try to put our business plans, we try to put our financial models, we try to put the customers calls we had, we put a lot of documents from the past and the present. But somehow sometimes there are inconsistencies across different submissions, like business plan, what you said does not meet what you are saying in your progress update. There's some differences. Financials which you gave earlier, you said you'll be investing x amount of dollars and now your investment has been a little bit less or more. What happens when things don't align, when there are these inconsistencies?
Yes, you have to explain it. The answer is you have to explain what happened. Why is it that you didn't meet the targets that you had set out in the original plan? What happened and what's your plan going forward as well, right? Here's the thing about the technology and explaining things. I guarantee you that an officer will not 100% understand the technology. I don't understand 100% of the technology. What the officer is looking for is A, has the product been built? How the end result? How many users do you have? How many partnerships do you have? Have you been able to get any revenue? Have you hired any Canadians? Have
Yeah.
you contracted any? These are the practical sort of situations that the officer is able to understand. And that's what counts in the end. So having the documents about how far you've progressed with your product development, it's good. Sometimes the technical things is good because if the officer doesn't understand it, they probably think it's, very complicated, okay? But that's not enough. That's not enough. What they really understand in the end is what has been done. Real life situation, what has the business achieved in the end?
So if I take the key from what the business has achieved so far, not all the technicality, but they're going to see the actions and the steps. Spencer, I'm not sure if you can answer it. I'm putting you to spot. It's a bit of a difficult question, but I'll bring you in. Have you experienced, and Liz and Dave, you can add after Spencer, is when the activities which were reported were a little bit slow in progress, or what you had said in your business plan you would do, there was gaps in activity, were there follow-up questions, or how this was taken in an application review? Did you get follow-up questions from the visa officer, or if before submitting to the visa officer you guys thought there were gaps and there was slow progress, how was that situation handled? Spencer, I'll start with you if you can answer if it has happened something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak at more of a general level
Yeah.
where, sometimes we have clients who, you know, maybe feel like the expectation is not sort of what we've been explaining today, and that, they kind of send in a business plan and wait for a decision. But, you know, if there are gaps, the one word I always kind of lean on and tell my clients is it's about traction. You want to think it's like any startup, right? Imagine if you were building a business, a venture-backed startup that you're looking to raise money and grow. You
Yeah.
need to prove to the investor that there's traction and potential for the future. So in my opinion, if there are gaps in activity, it's about filling those gaps and looking forward and saying, okay, fine, we said we were going to do this, but we didn't. Okay, what are we going to do going forward? How can we amend this? And explaining, if there was a reason why something didn't happen and why you're pivoting, explaining that pivot and then showing the traction and why that pivot was worthwhile and why it was better for the business.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it kind of goes back to the same message of documenting, trying to get traction, and trying, whatever your circumstances, whether you're in Canada or out of Canada, doing whatever you can to move the business forward
Yeah.
and showing the officer the evidence of that.
Okay. No, makes sense. Liz, do you have anything to add here? It's a complicated question, I know.
I'm just thinking, as Spencer was talking about investor, I think maybe if you think about the government of Canada as a potential investor,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
the government of Canada is a potential investor. In order for you to attract them, they're not going to give you money, but they're going to allow you to build your business and stay in Canada. What would you want to show them? Right? What kind of questions would an investor who wants to see if your business is worth it, worth investing, has a potential in the future, what would they want to see in your business? Right? Um, yeah, that's my take on it.
Okay. Dave, I'm going to ask you a more specific question and in the same tonality in the area we are talking about. What
Sure.
role do financial records play in supporting a business story? Where do applicants typically fall short? I know Elizabeth talked about the tax returns before. Zero tax filing doesn't help. You just got to an accountant. We need to show. So where does financial records play in supporting role in a business story from your perspective?
Oh, they play a substantial role because I think that's because that is something that is more tangible.
Mm-hmm.
If you've deployed capital
Mm-hmm.
and you're using that capital for your operational activities, uh, it could be events, marketing activities, maybe paying for like a short-term acceleration program somewhere, or for that matter, even hiring. Because when you set up a payroll, like you would also have to engage like an accountant or a bookkeeper, or for that matter, a CPA, and you're paying vendors. So basically, I think then that starts building tangible evidence. This is like just like running like an operation in any other country, any other geo.
Mm-hmm.
So and that builds the financial records, month by month. And then the statements are posted, and then you download the statements and attach them as evidences. So
Okay.
it's very simple. Like if there's capital that's been put aside for
Mm-hmm.
operations for a certain number of years, then as soon as the bank accounts open, it's advisable to deploy it.
Sure. No, thank you, Dave. That's very, very helpful. Now I'm going to shift gears again, moving from what PFLs are being asked, trends and patterns coming, what kind of questions being asked, and what you need to do. Let's focus on how do you need to respond when they come. Okay, that's a key here. Spencer, I'm going to start with you here. So when a client comes to you with an update request from IRCC or a procedural fairness letter from IRCC, what is usually your first step in breaking it down by to explain the client what is the officer asking for? How do you start the process?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, I would connect with the client, let them know that, if we were representing them on the file, that the correspondence would come to our office. We would set up a call and go through each of the questions in detail. I would want them to understand that, for every one of these questions, it's not just about answering. So, for example, if they ask you, do you own the patents? Do you own the IP? It's not just yes and move on to the next question. It's yes, and here is documentary evidence that I own it. So all of the, have you hired anybody? It's not just yes. It's yes, we have. We've hired 3 people and they're all Canadian citizens. This is their role. This is their duty. This is what we're paying them. And here is proof of the job description. Here's proof of the employment agreement. And here's proof of payroll showing that we've actually paid them. So it's
Mm-hmm.
about answering the question with detail and showing evidence of what you're saying. It's not just the words, it's also the documentary evidence. So when they ask questions about, is your website running? Yes, it is. Here's the link, and describe it. When they ask about a general business progress, show them a report, show them all the things that you've been doing, show them the screenshots of the meeting, show them pictures of you at the events, show them contracts that you've entered into, show them invoices. So it's not just tell, it's show and tell. And it's really important that, you might only have one chance to answer these questions, right? Like, for all you know, they could ask you once and make a decision. And so it's really important to have documentary evidence, as we've all sort of touched on, to back up the arguments that you're making. Because really, the way I like to think about it is you're making arguments on
Yeah.
behalf of your business that you should be approved. And you need to have evidence backing up your arguments.
So if I take from Spencer is answering the question is show and tell, not just answer the question back everything by evidence, what they're asking for. So Liz, if I bring you here, so when you're doing this show and tell, what mindset should founders adopt to ensure their response is credible and effective?
Yeah, I would certainly answer the question that has been asked, but that might not be all you do. For example, if you were able to have other aspects of you were able to hire Canadians, and the officer didn't ask about that, they might not know. But that's very good evidence about you running your business. You might have, maybe your Facebook is not up, but you might have other social media that's up, or you are in the process of developing, you've already hired web designers, or you've already been in the background doing that. Provide that sort of evidence. You need behind just the questions about what the officer is asking to understand why the officer is asking this, and see if you can also sort of address those underlying concerns about what they're asking for.
Okay. Dave, would you like to add anything on this?
No, I think they've covered it well. So I don't think I would add anything else.
Okay. So Now let's talk about in these responses where things can go wrong. Now we know that when the questions come, make sure you answer the question. You provide evidence, tangible evidence to the question they're being answered. And as Alice said, something is not being answered, but it actually helps in bringing out the credibility that you're fulfilling the program requirements, you're actually running your business. Feel free to add that in. So, Spencer, I'll bring you back in here. Have you seen situations where a response actually made things worse? And what was that situation? If you can just give us a general example and what typically goes wrong.
I mean, I would say, generally from our files, we try to avoid that, obviously, but I can
Yeah.
imagine, kind of going back to what I was saying before, is that if you're not answering the questions adequately, and what I believe that means is not providing the evidence or trying to skirt around, if you haven't done anything, like that is a problem. So I think,
Yeah.
if they ask you for progress and you have no progress to report on, that is a problem and that can lead to a negative decision. If you do have progress and you're not adequately reporting it, that could also lead to a problem. So I think it's, one, thinking about what can I do before IRCC comes to me with questions, and that is working on the business. And when they ask that question, making sure that I'm providing ample evidence to prove that when I say I own the IP, look, here's the trademarks, here's the filings, it's in process, or whatever it is. So just making sure that one, before the questions come, make sure you're actually working on the business and trying to move it forward. And
Mhm.
two, when you do get those questions, providing enough evidence.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Spencer. I should be cognizant of time. We're at 11, so I'm going to take last few questions, but I just want to tell all of you that we did not use the webinar. We thought we are at capacity at 100, and there are around 300, 200 people looking at the live streaming of the link. So this is very important. Dave, Spencer, and Liz, I might have to bring you back within a month or 2 months with some case laws. This is going to be very critical. But this is a very important question, which I'm sure you all are being asked day in and day out. We know that there is massive delays in the program right now. The timelines are way wonky at this time when we started. Some of the people, when they filed their application, it was 2 years now. Then it turned 5 years, and we don't know where it is right now. And the answers have been less clear at this point. And most common question you must be being asked by your clients is, when will I get a decision on my file? And is there anything I can do to speed it up? On based what you're seeing, what you should tell the clients about this. Liz?
So the answer is no, we can't do anything about speeding up applications other than when the officers do come to us, we provide answers and a timely basis and adequate answers on a timely basis. But what I can say is sometimes a delay can be a mixed blessing. Okay. For many of you, if you have not been working on your businesses, if an officer actually looks at your business now, there's only so much you can do to respond, right? If there's no evidence, like Spencer was saying, to back up the answers to your officer's questions, you haven't really been doing anything, then even if the officer were to look at your application today, it wouldn't be a good thing because your application would be rejected. Okay? So instead of, we can only control what we can control. The rest of the things we can't control. We cannot control how long it is going to be for IRCC to look at your application. I would say that there is movement nowadays. The IRCC is looking at priority files. And my estimate, which is completely not based on any sort of answer that the IRCC has told me at all, but my estimate is probably 2-3 years, maybe, that many of you might have an officer look at your application. Okay, but please remember, looking at your application does not by any means mean that your application is going to be approved. IRCC, when they look at they've announced, how many applications that they're going to approve for the quotas, how many they expect to go through, you'll see that the high is double what they expect, the median of what they expect to be approved. That probably means that they expect a whole bunch of applications to be rejected based on the reason that many of the files that they're looking at has shown very little activity. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. Think of this as an opportunity. What we are telling you today is there for you to act on. Think of it as an opportunity to take this time that you are given to actually act and run your business. Okay, so that when an officer actually gets to your business, then we have that evidence to support it. Because there's only so much lawyers can do. We can't perform magic. We can't turn back time and, show all this evidence if it hasn't been there at that time.
Sure. Spencer, please, this is a very important question. Can you speed up the
Yeah.
process? What's happening?
So I think I want to touch on a lot of the things and echo a lot of the things that Liz has said, because I want to also kind of set a warning to people that if any lawyer is telling you, guaranteeing any timelines or any sort of outcome, IRCC processing times are not guaranteed, they're subject to change, and they're not within our control. And so back to what we've been saying, there are always things that are in our control and always things that aren't. And the processing times are not within our control. So I wouldn't rely on anybody telling you that something is going to take a specific amount of time. Like, yes, we can all estimate. Like, I agree with Liz. Like, my estimate is I think that 2 to 3 year timeline is likely pretty reasonable. Like, but who knows? We have no idea. You guys could all get decisions tomorrow for all we know, right? But at the end of the day, the IRCC has outlined their priority processing mechanism, and it has been upheld in court. I can tell you there's a case that was published about a month ago where an applicant who is in the bottom rung of priority, and I'll explain what that means in a second for those who don't know, tried to pursue mandamus, and I will also explain that in a second. And even though they were granted leave and given a hearing, their application was dismissed because they weren't in the highest level of priority, and the judge upheld IRCC's priority system. And what IRCC has said is that they've grouped applicants into 3 different groups. The highest group is groups that have a priority letter of support, which is they've gotten it from a venture capital firm, they've gotten it from an angel investor group, an incubator in the Canadian tech network, or an incubator who has committed $75,000, and at least one person on the SUV specific work permit. And that group will be processed first on a first in, first out basis. Once all of those applications are processed, the next group will be processed first in, first out, which is those groups who have a priority letter of support. And once those are processed on a first in, first out basis, then everybody else will be processed on a first in, first out basis. So in my opinion, if you are in the top rung, that top priority group, and you've been processing for, around, and again, this is just an arbitrary number, but somewhere, in the 40-month range, you might be in a position to reasonably try to force a decision at federal court. You might be. But again, it's all going to be based on the facts of your case. And you might not want to do that because if you haven't done anything on your business, then as Liz said, you're not using the time as an opportunity to build your company. But I believe, if you're not in that top rung, then it's going to be very difficult to force a decision. And it's about using this time as an opportunity to build your business. So at the time that the officer takes a look, they say, wow, like this is the kind of business, this is the kind of family that we want here building our economy for the future in this country.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is very important. Actually, Dave, before you answer something, I saw a question in the comments, which I think so we should answer now. Very important. People are asking, what is a procedural fairness letter? What is a PFL? We've been talking about it. I think so I should have taken this as the first question, thinking everybody knows what it is. Spencer, Elizabeth, what is a procedural fairness letter? What is a PFL?
Yeah, so a procedural fairness letter is a letter that is sent by an officer that if they have any concerns on your file based on your eligibility or their decision as to whether to approve or refuse your file, they'll come back and they'll send you this letter and they'll ask you some questions and give you an opportunity to clarify the issues that they have and to dismiss these issues. And then based on your responses, the government will likely make a decision off of those responses.
Okay, perfect. Liz, anything you want to add in clarifying, or this is enough?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the procedural fairness letters can look scary because on the letters they might say, oh, we have these issues, we think that we might want to refuse your applications, and the wording might be a little scary, but it is just something that we are seeing on a regular basis with applications. So don't necessarily panic if you get a procedural fairness letter. It is something that is
Could be a
normal
good thing.
to receive.
It could be a
Yeah.
good thing.
It means that they're
It
looking
means
at your
they're looking at your
application at least.
file. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're actually
And it
looking at your
likely means
application, right?
100%. And it likely means they're
yeah,
going to make a decision soon.
exactly. Okay, so everything you work with your lawyer, but also have that folder of all the evidence that you can then present. And if you have substantial evidence to present, normally the officer is reasonable and they will grant you the permanent residence. And even if the officer is not reasonable, at least then you will be armed with some ammunition for lawyers to go to court on your case as well, even if it's rejected. Yeah.
Thanks, Liz. That totally makes sense. Dave, I want to bring you on one aspect here in which we hear a lot of times from the founders going through our program. How do you differentiate between a real market validation versus just early stage interest or conversations? Because I hear I send an email to someone looking at my product versus somebody's testing it. So what do you have seen there?
So like from my experience, I think like we should treat the validation process as like a super sacred process.
Yeah.
Uh, like, for a founder to have discussed it with their partners in a room is different as opposed to taking the product to a simulation environment and seeing whether it's working or not.
Yeah.
So, the best way to do this and to get market validation is when one, obviously the DO is doing it for them. But at the same time, like the founders should always from time to time engage a third party vendor who specializes in market validation and focus groups to get that reality check and that document, because then that's like an unbiased assessment of what they've built
Yeah.
or what the DO has approved as well. So it gets everyone off the hook, because then you have like a third party demand validation entity that's providing like their assessment, like a completely unbiased assessment of what the product looks like.
Yeah.
And you have those analytics and you have that data to back up the venture with. So I would I personally advise founders to do that, like at least every year, uh, just so that they're able to position their product better, and that's good evidence for the IRCC as well, because that's serious work. I mean, it's not something that people have concocted in a room.
Yeah.
So they're actually going out and getting it done and getting it validated.
Okay, my list have several questions, and we're in the last 5 minutes, and I did look at the questions in the chat as well. So I'm going to ask one of my last questions, and before I pick up the questions from the chat, I will say most of the questions are very specific to your business plan. If these guys are not the lawyers on your file, they have no idea what your business is, the kind of questions you're asking is how much I need to do to prove to the client, they cannot answer that. Please ask your service provider that question, your immigration consultant or a lawyer. If they are your lawyers on the file, set up a separate consult with them, because what we are tackling is very generic questions which apply to all of you. The questions are: we are not in the country, we have done this, will it be enough? Nobody can answer that question till they look at your business plan. What were you planning to do? Have you done enough based on what you were planning to do, what you could do remotely? So, my last question to everyone, and then I'm going to pick up one or two questions from the chat which are generic, which will be helpful. I'm not picking up questions which are so specific to your business plan that cannot be answered here. So, all the founders here who have not received a PFA or an update letter till now, what is your one piece of advice what they should be doing now? I know this you all have repeated, but I just want to summarize your key for them, what they should be doing. Liz, I'm going to start with you.
I feel like this question, have I done enough? That's not the question you should be asking. You will never be able to do enough. What do you mean do enough, right? For your business, it's ongoing. It's ongoing, right? So you don't ever stop with your business. I've done enough, now I stop with my business. You continue on with your business. You continue running your business. The IRCC officer is the most picky of investors. They don't trust anything. They don't trust anything. They see results, okay? And so throughout this entire time, don't think I've done enough. Think what else I can do for the business. Okay. What else an investor will want you to do. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Spencer, what they should be doing if they haven't received the PFA.
I mean, I love what Liz said. I totally agree with that. And also, it kind of echoes what we've been saying the whole time is like, the reality is right now is like, I can tell you, we have clients who've been waiting just for the acknowledgement of receipt for too long of a time. And of course they're nervous. Understand, like I get those emails every day. But at the end of the day, it will get picked up. They will look at it. And once they do, they're going to send you a letter and say, "Hi, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, what have you done on this business?" And you want to be equipped with the ammo to answer that question effectively. And that means that this is the time to work on the business, to gain some traction, and to do the things that you said that you were going to do in your business plan. And, I think that kind of echoing what Liz said, if you were preparing for a pitch to get investment into your business, there's never enough, right? It's what can I do more? What will we do more? How can I show this person that not only have I created a significant amount of traction in a small amount of time, but that there's significant potential for this company to provide a significant benefit to Canada. And that's the mindset. So take the time as an opportunity, push your business forward, use the resources you have, whether you're using a lawyer or third-party sort of venture builders, lean on your designated organizations. All of these people are here to lift you up and to put you in the best position possible to get the outcome that you want for your family. Because at the end of the day, that's the thing that matters most. And that's, think about you're building this business in Canada to get, to build it, but also for, to get your outcome that you want.
Dave, would you like to add anything here?
It's just something like really short and tight. So like with the PFLs, if you're lucky, you'll have 30 days. Like if you're not lucky, then you'll have 7 days. So
Yeah, 3
there is
days.
3 days,
3
3
days.
days. So there is no backdating. Like, I mean, I was having a conversation with the founder, like, and then that person mentioned that they haven't incorporated the company since the letter of support that they had received, like for the last 3 years. So that itself is questionable. So what I'm just saying is that you have 3 to 30 days, and there is no backdating of documents. There's no engineering. That's not advisable. And if you've not done something, prior to receiving the PFL, you should not be doing it when you receive it. because that's automatically questionable. So it's a blessing that you have this time. Just use it to put everything that you have into the project and do everything by the book. Check all the boxes. Just run the business like you would in any part of the world. Like it could be South Africa or it could be Ukraine.
Absolutely. Now, it's all about running your business. And I do have some questions. There is one question is, do designated entities typically provide guidance on building annual operating plan for startup visa business, including minimum level of activities? Okay. I can only answer for Thai and Tangentia because I don't know how other designated entities run their program. If you are going through the module, you will see in the module one, we ask you to lay down the 12 months of activities that you're doing. And this is a living document which you will be updating for us in third month, sixth month, ninth month, 12th month, and then in the 24 month as to what were you planning to do, what you have done, and what are you planning to do in the future. Then you tell in 3 months what things you have done, what you couldn't do, how the plan is changing. So that's how our incubation program, both for our venture backed files, our incubator backed file, we are asking you that to make sure, and that's on the context of your business plan that helps you to understand your business plan well. Go through it again and again, at least every 3 months to see, oh, this is what I said I will do, what I have done, and keep pivoting that document. That's why we ask an updated version of the same document at the third month, sixth month, ninth month, and 12th month of the program. Since our program is 12 months program, we are still continuing to support the founders by asking at 24 months again, hey, where is your operations plan? What you were planning to do, what you have done. That is the support we are providing from our end. So there is this what types of evidence are most persuasive to demonstrate ongoing business activity? I think so. We have talked about it, your social media, your dashboards, traction, revenue, all that goes towards. This is a question I think so. If Spencer and Liz, you can answer, and maybe you'll have to tweak the question. The question is that the co founders are across the world, and what is a well documented capital injection as per the regulation? I don't know what is I think so. They're not talking about the amount, but
It's a
how do
great
you
question.
document? Yeah, well documented capital injection. Additionally, what financial documents and verification step does IRCC typically rely on to assess the legitimacy and the source of the funds? I think so that's going to the provenance, and this is an important question. Like, how does
So
IRCC look at the provenance of the funds if you're investing?
I actually think that it's more important to show proof. It's to show proof of investment. These are typically what I would recommend is one, if you have a company bank account showing the funds in the account. Two, subscription agreements of the applicants showing that they have exchanged funds in exchange for shares. Share certificates, you could show board approvals um, of the financing, showing that the company can't issue shares until funds have been received, and then show the share certificates showing that obviously if the share certificates have been issued, then funds have been transferred. You can also show the bylaws. Usually your company bylaws will have something similar to that, showing that share certificates can't be issued until consideration has been received. I would say that is typically enough evidence to show investment funds. I know on the work permits, I'm seeing lots of questions about the work permits. I know that's definitely a contested issue, and at least we've seen in our practice something that is very sort of inconsistently applied in work permit applications. So, I think that amount of evidence is strong enough to show that there has been investment.
Great. Liz, do you want to put anything on provenance in the funds?
Right. So in terms of external investors, I think that I agree with Spencer that, you don't necessarily need to show provenance of funds of external investors per se. It's enough to show that they have actually invested in your business. As for yourself, if you're the applicant and you have invested in the business, they will want you to show, where did your funds come from? And it's difficult for me to answer, because every person's situation is different. But in general, what I tend to do is say, okay, well, I'm going to look at your situation. Is it reasonable looking at the way that your bank accounts are, that you have gained this amount of money through your salary, or you sold property, or it really depends on your circumstances and what makes common sense. A lot of times, I think before, when work permits were still allowed and we were applying at visa posts, the visa posts had a lot of differing standards that they were looking at.
Yes.
Inside Canada, I think it's more consistent. If you can show, reasonably that these funds are yours and they're not just a loan that you have to pay back. In general, you can show that these investment funds are reasonable. Like, well, how much do you have to submit for the investment? Well, enough to run the business. Well, how do you know how much you need to run the business? Have a financial plan, etc., etc. And so in these kind of circumstances for the investment, if it's yourself, show that you have the funds, but show also that the investment is that you have invested is what the business actually needs you to invest.
Okay. One next question I have is, and I'm going to go quick because in last 2 minutes left, we have to wrap up by 11:25. Can we extend work permit quickly? Extension of work permit,
Yes.
is it allowed?
Depends on the
Yes.
kind of work permit. If it's a startup visa work permit right now and it's still valid, you can extend it. If your work permit has already expired a long time ago, beyond restoration status, then to apply again, that would be a new work permit, and likely that's not going to be allowed at the visa post.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do we need
and
to revise? Sorry, go ahead, Spencer, please.
no, that I was just gonna say that if you haven't ever applied for a work permit under the startup visa program, you cannot do it now.
Yeah.
I think that's the
Yeah.
most important point. December 17th, you cannot. Do we need a revised business plan if it is not followed the original business plan, or we just need to write the explanation letter? What do we do?
I'm hesitant to just give a blanket answer on this. It really depends on the circumstances as to, what it is. Work permit applications, the officers don't necessarily have access necessarily to all of the documents that were submitted for the PR applications. So it really depends on the circumstances if, what you have to submit, but it has to be reasonable. And if you have changed substantially from the original business plan, you might want to explain what it is and
This
why
is a
you're
very
doing it.
interesting question. I'm going to take this up, and this will be the last question. Organizing team, can you please take the screenshot of all the questions which are there in the chat? I'm looking at the response today and the number of people waiting. I'll have to get you guys back within a month. You'll have to give me another hour then. And the focus will also be the case law which is coming on startup visa. People need to know what beyond visa officers what courts are thinking at this point. So we will do that within a month and a half or early June or end of May, something like that. So this is important, and I didn't think so. We picked it up. What are the most common factors that lead to IRCC to question whether an applicant is truly an essential member? What type of evidence are most effective in demonstrating their critical roles? I would pivot the question is, yeah, go ahead. If you want to pivot the question some way.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that we have to demonstrate that someone is essential. I've never had that sort of
That question is
it's a-
usually with a
yeah.
designated entity because designated
Yeah.
entity has the onus to decide somebody is essential or non-essential. But I will put the question now is,
I can
you want-
actually say
please,
something
go
on
ahead.
this. So
Mm.
one thing we have seen when it comes to questions about who's essential and who's not is if you are, and I don't think it will apply going forward groups, but I can say for past groups, we've seen questions that say, hey, Mr. Miss or Mrs. So-and-so, you are essential and you are not in the country, or you never applied for a work permit.
Yeah.
Why? And I think you have to trace it back to what does it actually mean to be essential? And if you click essential on your you are telling the government that you are urgently needed in Canada to work on your business, and that essentially this business cannot run without
Without you.
your Canada.
Sure.
So a lot of people say, oh, I have a work permit, but I have business back in my home country. How long do I have to stay in Canada? There's no magic number where if you've stayed for 100 days, they're not going to question you. It doesn't work like that. And so what I think you have to think about is, because you've told IRCC this, that evidence is out there, that ABC Incorporated cannot run without me in Canada.
Yeah.
So if you're not there, it can cause issues.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a very reasonable explanation. If you don't, you should be in Canada. Now, I think it poses an interesting sort of challenge for these sort of newer groups that got letters of support in the back half of 2025, thinking that they'd be able to rely on coming to Canada with the work permit. And I think it goes back to, what we were discussing before, that as things change, document those changes. You can send in explanations or business progress reports to IRCC explaining like, hey, we got our letter of support on this date. I'm essential. I was supposed to come to Canada. Now I can't. So this is how we're pivoting, and this is what we're doing to make sure that this business can still operate properly.
Sure. I was planning to wrap this up, but there is one question which I think is a complete misunderstanding. I need to address it. So there was an article with a very senior immigration lawyer who worded the article in a wrong way, which said Ministerial Instruction 72, which is MI 72, is your designated entity compliant with it or not? So let me please explain this very carefully, because I've been asked again and again, is Tangential tie compliant? If not, what are you trying to be compliant? There was not a list which was sent to the designated entity with tasks to do or submit the documents. Ministerial Instruction 72 simply said that anybody who gets a letter of support from a designated entity which invests, at that time it was compulsory for an angel investor group to invest 75,000 and a VC group to invest 200,000, commit to invest 200,000, they were considered as priority. Then they said there are few incubators which are the part of Canada Tech Network. If you get a letter of support from them, you will be considered as priority, which the Spencer just gave the list of priority. Then they said incubators which are not the part of the Canada Tech Network, if you want an application coming through you to be priority, that can also happen. You have to provide commitment to invest $75,000. That exactly came out in the ministerial instruction. So please go and read the instruction. It never said that you will be derecognized as a designated entity, or if you will be need to follow some steps to be continue to be compliant. There was no compliant criteria. There was nothing given. There was no work given to the designated entities. And the same criteria the government has continued now, that if you are a designated VC or a designated angel investor and you commit to invest 200,000 as a VC and you commit to invest 75,000 an angel investor, your priority. If you're an incubator with Canada Tech Network, you give a letter of support, it's a priority. If you're an incubator not with Canada Tech Network and you give 75,000, you're a priority. That's exactly what was there. We can send you the link for ministerial instruction. There is no question somebody being compliant or non-compliant with the ministerial instruction. There were no steps. There are no documents we need to submit. There is no checklist that we have to do. So please get this straight. And if Spencer and Elizabeth, you must have read that article and it caused a lot of confusion. Only thing is, there is nothing compliance homework being given to a designated entity. That's what I'm just trying to tell.
There's a lot of information out there, and things will change. And there's one thing constant about immigration is things do change. But I have to say, Upasana, I think these kind of sessions is very, very much needed to kind of get everyone on the right track. And thank you so much for holding this today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dave, Spencer, last words.
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry, you can go first, Steph. Go for
No,
it.
no, please go ahead. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as Liz said, immigration law, it changes every day. For all we know, there could have been a massive change during this webinar itself. And I think that there's a ton of information out there that is reliable and unreliable, just like anything. And I hope that you're all working with people who you trust, and it's really important to understand that as things change, sometimes strategies have to change, sometimes expectations have to change. And I think that luckily in Canada there's a great network of immigration lawyers and providers who understand that and take that responsibility seriously. And so of course, if you guys ever need any help, or everybody here on this webinar is here to assist you. And good luck, and remember to work on your business.
Perfect. Dave?
Sure, I would just say that, there's just a lot of unsettling information on public domain, some of which are qualified, some of which are, most of them are unqualified. So I think for the purpose of the application and all the founders involved, the only thing I would say is I would suggest just cut out all the clutter and just focus on the execution and operationalization, because that that alone will help you sail through and navigate through this entire process. Any other information you should not be relying on. If you're working with a lawyer, work with them. You don't need to be working with 10 other lawyers or 10 other DOs. If you're working with a certain DO, just have trust in that DO and that lawyer that you're working with.
Thank you.
Because that's the only way to do it.
Thank you. So you all are on hook to come back in a month and a half to 2 months. We will discuss the next aspects of the topic. We have taken the screenshots of questions which we were not able to answer. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Elizabeth, Dave, and Spencer, and thank you for all the participants. Next time we'll do a webinar format so we have more, we can accommodate more people. Those who were not able to join, we did send you the live streaming link. I hope you were able to see that. We will have this recording on Thai website for some time as well. Only thing is that there is one question regarding, yes, Thai and Tangentia is changing the platform on which we are offering our incubation program right now. The transition phase is going on right now. You will be getting emails very soon about the new platform where we will be hosting our program. The platform we were hosting our program, they just got acquired and they don't want to do incubation program anymore. It's going to be a little hassle, but you are very, very smart founders, very tech savvy. I am sure this transition we will all work through in next month and a half. We will give you login to the new platform. People, those who have completed their program, there is no problem for them. Your program is done. You will be getting your certificate soon from us regarding the completion of the program. Thank you. Thank you so much.